For anyone who doesn't know, until I'm proving wrong, I'm theorizing about the timeline of Five Nights at Freddy's under the assumption that there's two distinct timelines. Essentially, and very briefly, FNAF Help Wanted presents us with an issue. The idea that there were a series of games made by an indie developer paid for by Fazbear Entertainment to cover up the history of the Fazbear franchise. Does this mean that every game before Help Wanted is suddenly not canon? I don't think so. It does present us with a quandary though. How much of those games can we trust? And how much of those games were the indie games made by the dev? We know from the tapes that a majority of the plot of those games is true to what happened in real life, but there's now unreliability throughout them. So what does this mean? Besides the fact that now Steelwell and Scott can just retcon things when they need to in order to make a new plot. More importantly for today's theory, it means that those games have their own separate and succinct timeline. So if we can figure out the timeline of those older games, we'll solve one of two things. Either we'll solve the entire real timeline of FNAF up until Ultimate Custom Night, or we'll solve exactly what Fazbear Entertainment was trying to tell the public happened in the new timeline. So, absolute worst case scenario, we're still solving something important. Where do we begin? By gathering our ingredients, of course. We need to dredge up every single bit of lore we can possible from these games. That would be FNAF 1, 2, 3, 4, World, Sister Location, Pizzeria Simulator, and Ultimate Custom Night. 8 games in total, as those are the ones that I found are probably made by the game dev in-universe. I know the books only say 1 through 3 and part of 4, but looking at what is referenced in Help Wanted and Security Breach, it seems likely that the other ones are actually in-game games as well. Once we have all of the lore, we can piece it together Pepe Sylvia style and try to make our own timeline. Honestly, we'll form the ultimate pre-Help Wanted FNAF timeline. Today's day 2 of our journey, and we'll be going over the lore from FNAF World onward. So slices, put on your aprons, and let's bake ourselves a theory. Let's start with FNAF World, as it was released before Sister Location. And like some of the games here, there isn't really written lore besides the dialogue that's in-game. Frankly, a lot of the categories we've been using don't really work for the upcoming game, so I might do away with them entirely. For FNAF World, I'll just summarize what happens in the game and we'll pin things that seem important as we go. The game opens on 2 dots that look like eyes. There's a voice behind them that lets us know that everything that happens out there has an effect in here. It tells us that something has gone wrong and now it can be seen here. That's why they're here. They won't let the same thing happen to us. They will put us back together. Then a hard cut and we're at the title screen. Yeah, big old pin right there. Whoever is orchestrating what we're about to see had something that happened to them, which is very similar to something that apparently happened to us. They're stuck in FNAF World now, but they don't want that to happen to us. It's also worth pointing out that this text mirrors the text at the end of FNAF 4. Moving on, we pick our difficulty, pick our party, we speak to Fredbear, and then they give us the plot of the game. Also note, doubling down now that this design is definitively Fredbear, which backs up our Nightmare Fredbear point from last video. But if you waited this text long enough, eventually a glitched Fredbear will appear, with text that reads, "But you don't really believe that, do you? There's a task for you to complete. You have to leave breadcrumbs for him, to help him find his way." Yep, that is a pin. The plot of this game seems to be that we, the player, are helping him to do something. We are leading him somewhere. It kind of seems like we're helping him move on, but we're not sure yet. Going on to the next Fredbear location, the glitched Fredbear says, "Yes, the world beneath the surface world. This is a safe place, a sanctuary. The truth is, there is no safe place. You don't understand that. You were made for one thing. There's a task for you to complete. Before you follow this passage, go back. Find the clock." Definite pin here. This text makes me think that either the text at the beginning and this Fredbear are 2 separate characters, or they're talking to 2 separate people. Especially because in the beginning, it seems like they're taking care of somebody, but now we were literally made. Did they make us? It's a little confusing. We then find the clock, interact with it, and do a very low-bit minigame where we push a balloon boy into a box. The rest of the game follows this formula. Play the game as normal, find a clock, do a weird minigame. But when you look at all the minigames together though, they start to make sense. We put Balloon Boy in a box, hit 4 buttons, put 4 cupcakes into boxes, set a code, and put a rabbit into a box. Pin. We're not sure why yet, but it's very clear that what we're doing in FNAF World mirrors the actions you have to take in FNAF 3 to allow the happiest day to happen. Once all the clocks have been set, we get access to a key, we grab that, we go to this portal, and we're met with this screen. The same as from the beginning, but now text that reads, "We are still your friends, do you believe that? All the pieces are in place for you. Now all you have to do is find them. Rest." And then the game ends. So yeah, pin there. Once again, this seems to be talking to someone else, letting them know that we as the player did our job and now they can move on, or something. Also worth noting that when you do this ending, you get a trophy that looks like a crying child, so put a pin there too. Before we move on to the other endings in DLC, I wanted to point out a few bits of dialogue that seem weird enough that warrant a pin. One of them being, you're being led through hoops, meanwhile the puppet master is laughing at you. Pin. It seems to imply that something nefarious is within FNAF World, or maybe even the creator of FNAF World itself. It's not clear, but it does feel important, and it's doubled and tripled down later in the game. You're being pulled on a string for his amusement. The one who pulls the strings is always watching. He allows you to progress. Don't be deceived by the one pulling the strings. This has to be important. It's repeated all the time. Alright, other endings time. If you follow Fredbear's advice and play the game as normal on easy difficulty, you'll be met with this text box. Congratulations, you beat an imaginary monster in an imaginary game without taking any risks and without finding anything interesting on the easiest possible difficulty. So, great job. I'm still in control of you, and I say that you are finished here. You did away with a pretty powerful creation, but as for me, I remain out of your reach. It goes on to make fun of you a little bit more and then ends. Pin. Part of me thinks that this could be the aforementioned puppet master, or maybe just Scott Cawthon himself. We're not sure yet, but this feels important. If you do that same thing but on the harder difficulty, the final boss you fight instead is Scott Cawthon himself. Once you defeat him, you get the text, "It was fun being the puppet master." Oh. Well, that's anticlimactic. Mystery solved? Okay, let's move on to a more interesting ending. Throughout the game, you go through glitches to get through different areas. If you go too many glitches deep, you encounter this lake with this man fishing. He calls himself Old Man Consequences, lets you know there's nothing else here, and the game ends. Pin. Because he does feel important, but like I said in my FNAF World video, he feels like an intentional part of FNAF World that just stops the player when they've gone too far. Especially because there's an even more secret ending you can get while here. If you force yourself into the lake, you go one glitch deeper. You fall for a while, and then you're met with this image. Some people think it's an angel, others think it's a figure holding their arms around two other figures in front of a TV. Whatever it is, it's not clear, but we will put a pin in it. Finally, and no, the Chipper and Sons boss is not lore, and I refuse to acknowledge it as such. In the wave of DLC for this game, they added a whole new section where you're playing minigames created by this guy at a desk, and you have to eventually figure out that the real secret boss is Chica's Magic Rainbow, and once you beat her and go back, you're met with this scene where the man at the desk apologizes, says he's made something stronger and out of his control named Baby. The lights go out, we hear this voice line.
The show will begin momentarily. Everyone, please stay in your seats.
And when the lights come back on, he's dead. Definitely a few pins here. How about this guy at the desk says that he makes Baby, and then Baby proceeds to kill him. Now, who is this Baby, you might be asking? Let's find out. But before we leave FNAF World, we typically pick a pin that says all the characters in the game, but there's too many in this game. So just pin that there's a lot of characters here, and we'll move on. Alright, FNAF World done. Now from one lore mess onto another, sister location. This one is also kind of weird, but most of the lore is actually just the plot of the game. This has to be like day 4. Maybe day 5. Wait a minute. Oh, yes! It's one of those sponsored things. Maybe this will give me something that can help. Okay. Thank you to today's sponsor, Manscaped. Okay. This is what I'm talking about. With great products like this, you've probably already heard about Manscaped, and I'm sure they're all over the internet. But for anyone who doesn't know, they provide some of the best shaving experiences on the market. Starting with the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer. It's their 4th generation electric body trimmer that is cordless and waterproof, built-in advanced skin-safe technology, travel lock capabilities, and an LED light for closer and more precise trimming. Something like this will prevent nicks and scrapes, which is something I need out here, because I need to cut myself as little as possible. And that's not all they have. For someone that travels in the back rooms all day like me, they've got plenty of things to make sure that I don't get too swampy down there. Things like their Crop Reviver ball toner and Crop Preserver ball deodorant. That way, even if I'm in the back rooms, I'm not getting too sweaty, we'll say. And you don't have to get these things individually. Right now they have the Performance Package Kit right on the website. It's an all-in-one men's body grooming kit with tools and liquid solutions for everything down there. It comes with everything you've seen here. The Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, Crop Preserver ball deodorant, Crop Reviver ball toner, the Magic Mat, and for a limited time, it also comes with 2 gifts, the Manscaped High Performance Boxer Briefs, the Shed Travel Bag. Let me just say, I've got them on now, I can vouch. So make sure to get 20% off your Manscaped order and free shipping with the code RYTOAST at manscaped.com. Thanks again to Manscaped for sponsoring today's video. Manscaped, your balls will thank you. So again, we'll just go through the plot and the lore that presents it and pin things as we go. And then we'll go back for any lore bits that don't normally appear. So let's get into it. Sister Location was actually the first game to feature an entire roster of voice actors, and they really show off with it. It's not just Scott on the phone anymore. They flex this immediately with the opening cutscene.
There are just certain design choices that were made for these robots that we don't fully understand. We were hoping that you could shed some light on those.
She can dance. She can sing. She's equipped with a built-in helium tank for inflating balloons right at her fingertips. She can take song requests. She can even dispense ice cream.
With all due respect, those aren't the design choices we were curious about, Mr. Afton.
Now, there's a few things of note here. First off, we get the name Mr. Afton. Pin there, that feels super important. But then we have to think about the scenario as a whole. He's being questioned. Is this the police that we mentioned earlier in FNAF 1? It's unclear. Regardless, pin that this Mr. Afton is being questioned about the robots he's made. As we begin the game, we're going deep underground and being talked to by Hand Unit, an AI robot that's set to help us throughout the nights. Notably, it has a sticky note on it that says the name Mike. Now we know its name is Hand Unit, and although it calls us Eggs Benedict, I doubt that's our actual name. So there's a chance that that's the protagonist's name, but for now, we'll put a pin that the name Mike is notable. We enter a vent, and while we're there, we hear that as Freddy Fazbear's pizza shut down, these robots open to fill that void. So pin that this takes place after Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has been shut down. As we play, we learn that this game takes place within an underground bunker. Pin. And the main animatronics we see are Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, Ballora, and Circus Baby. Pin there as well. In between nights, we sit in this living room and watch a TV show called The Immortal and the Restless. Not sure if it will be important yet, but it feels weird enough to pin it. Moving on, later in the second night, the power goes out and Hand Unit shuts down. While Hand Unit is gone, Circus Baby begins to talk to us. She lets us know that we are in danger as long as the power is out and we should hide under the desk to keep ourselves safe. But notably, she mentions that someone who worked here before was the one who built this nook. So pin that we are not the first people to come down here. Also, while we're hiding from these little bitty babs, they say the lines, "Is it the same person?" and "She's watching us." That's sus, pin there. Once the bitty babs leave, Circus Baby warns us that Hand Unit is wrong about the next room and tells us what we actually have to do. We follow her advice, we survive, and then we get to the breaker room, and here's something really interesting. Sure, there's this minigame where you're avoiding Funtime Freddy while resetting the fuses, but get a good look at this breaker room map. At first, this makes sense. Everything with bold lines is where we currently are, and there's a gray dot that represents each animatronic. We've got one for Funtime Freddy, Ballora, Funtime Foxy, and Circus Baby. But notice there's 3 areas with faded lines and distinct maps with their own respective dots. Does it look familiar? It should, because this top right diagram is an exact replica of the layout from the gameplay of FNAF 4, along with 4 dots for those animatronics. Nightmare Bonnie, Nightmare Chica, Nightmare Freddy, and Nightmare Foxy. Even more so, on the top left side, there's an exact replica of the layout of the FNAF 4 cutscenes. We see the 4 rooms of the house, the street to get to the restaurant, and 2 gray dots for Fredbear and Spring Bonnie in that restaurant. This is crazy. And the bottom left is a little confusing, but it does look very similar to the hallway we play Fun with Plushtrap in, and that gray dot right at the end would be Plushtrap. There's 4 more dots in here, which is a little confusing. Now, this could be the Halloween update characters, but it's unclear, but we know at least for a fact that Sister Location and the FNAF 4 areas are intrinsically linked. So, big old pin right there. It also seems to be implying that FNAF 4 wasn't a dream, or at least it took place in some manner. It also seems to imply that the FNAF 4 house we see in-game and the house we see in the cutscenes are actually 2 separate locations, so put a pin in there as well. The rest of the night is mostly uneventful, and the beginning of the next one is as well, until you're presented with the choice to follow Hand Unit or go back to Circus Baby Gallery. If you go to the Circus Gallery, climb under the desk and close the door, and wait. Circus Baby tells you a story. It's kind of long, but it essentially boils down to she was only ever used once. When she was there was kids coming in and out of the room, she smelled great, there was glitter, it was a party, and then she was alone with one girl. And without her wanting to, she automatically did something that caused screaming, and then when the other kids came back, it was drowned out. Something happened, and it sounds like she maybe killed that girl and she's not sure why. We can actually get some more context for this to make a more succinct pin with something I haven't mentioned up until now. Before every night, we actually get one more bit of dialogue, a little girl talking to her father. In order they are,
Daddy, why won't you let me play with her? Daddy, you let the other children go see her. Why won't you let me go? Daddy, just once let me go play with her. She's so pretty and shiny. Didn't you make her just for me? Daddy, she can make balloons. Have you seen her make balloons? Oh, Daddy, let me go to her. Daddy isn't watching.
and then at the end of night 5 we get,
Don't tell Daddy that I'm here. I wanted to watch your show too. I don't know why he won't let me come see you. You're wonderful. Where did the other children go?
So apparently, whoever made these robots, presumably a Mr. Afton from the first cutscene, had a daughter who he explicitly did not want to play with them. But she did anyway, and possibly she was the one that was killed by Circus Baby. But we're not making conclusions yet, so we'll just pin that a Mr. Afton had a daughter that really wanted to play with Circus Baby, and Circus Baby killed a girl when she was all alone. We can double down on this later, but we'll get there. Anyways, back to the game. At the end of the night, you're jump scared by Funtime Foxy and pass out. You wake up inside of a Springlock suit, and Circus Baby mentioned that she put you in there to protect you, and as long as you can hold still until 6 a.m., someone will come and find you. A few notable things during this sequence. 1, Circus Baby mentions that this came from her old pizzeria. So, pin that it confirms that she came from a pizzeria, and that it had a Springlock suit. 2nd, during this scene, we're introduced to the Scooper. Pin there. We will get more information about it in a later game, but for now, just know that the Scooper exists. Also, there are other workers here, which feels kind of wild, so put a pin there as well. We barely survive the minigame, and then we go back for more on night 5. This night is a little packed, but essentially, Circus Baby lies to us to trick us to walk into the scooping room. Once in there, she shows that the voice talking to us is actually coming from Ennard, a collection of all of the endoskeletons of the Funtime animatronics, and they explain that they want to scoop us to use our skin as their exoskeleton so they can leave this bunker and live amongst normal people. We get scooped, it shows our silhouette with robotic eyes, and the game ends. Big ol' pin there. So that's the base game, but there is a secret ending. Once you beat the game proper, you unlock the ability to do a rare death minigame easily from the extras menu. The minigame itself is Circus Baby giving cupcakes to children. If you can give every child enough cupcakes to fill them, get the ice cream from the end and go all the way back to the beginning, you see this scene where Circus Baby puts out an ice cream, a little girl walks up by herself, and she scoops her. That sounds like exactly what we were talking about before, so that's pretty much confirmation. But this also unlocks a private room where we can do a few things. First, if you input a code on the wall, you unlock cameras showing the FNAF 4 house, doubling down on the fact that these games are connected. Tripling down even is the fact that this Fredbear plushie has a walkie-talkie. So put a pin there that someone in this room was possibly talking through the Fredbears using this walkie-talkie and looking through these cameras. The rest of this is the Ennard fight, but something notable is that Ennard can talk in the voice of that little girl, and one of the lines that he says is, "Isn't this why you came here? To be with her again?" Which is wild, so put a pin that the protagonist has some sort of a connection with this daughter. Now, moving on to some of the unlockable lore you get through doing different modes in the custom night. The first set of cutscenes you unlock is seeing the skin suit walk throughout its day and slowly get more and more decayed until eventually the body around it fully decays and it has to eject itself into the sewers. Put a pin there that their plan eventually doesn't work. But we do see after Circus Baby says, "You won't die" several times, the skin suit resurrects itself and gets the same glowing eyes that the FNAF 1 animatronics had when they showed possession. So put a pin that it seems like this protagonist just possessed himself, which is crazy. The other unlockable cutscene is actually a monologue that gives us a lot of lore. So I'm going to play the whole monologue, slightly sped up and with the pauses cut out so you can get the whole chunk, and we'll talk about pins after.
Father, it's me, Michael. I did it. I found it. It was right where you said it would be. They were all there. They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you. And I found her. I put her back together, just like you asked me to. She's free now. Something is wrong with me. I should be dead, but I'm not. I've been living in shadows. There is only one thing left for me to do now. I'm going to come find you. I'm going to come find you.
Okay, so a few pins here. First, the protagonist of Sister Location's name is Michael, and he's talking to his father who told him to come down here and put her back together. He did, but he also didn't. And then he died, but he also didn't. So he then swears that he's going to come and find him. Pin. And finally, it's heavily implied through this cutscene that Springtrap is actually the father, as we see him rise out of the ashes of the Fazbear Frights attraction. Pin there. We can also start making conclusions about who is who, but we'll save that for the third video of the series. For now, let's move on to Scott Games teasers. As far as pictures themselves, it's mostly just cool images. Granted, we see Ennard saying there's a piece of me in every body, but we already know that. The real kicker for lore is hidden in two locations on this site. The first is the image cancelled due to leaks. If you braid it up, it shows you a newspaper article where it shows that Circus Baby Pizza World was closed on its first day due to gas leaks. So we can assume that this is actually when the incident occurred with Circus Baby and Mr. Afton's daughter. Pin there. But also, there's some source code teasers that shows us a schedule of renting out the different animatronics and something that teases about a Chica's Pizza World, which is completely new information, so pins for those. That's a long one. Mainly because it's hard to go through because all the lore is just the plot. I can't just summarize it. Luckily, the next game, Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator, while just as lore heavy, the lore isn't intrinsically linked to the gameplay, so we can go a little bit more piecemeal as we go through it. And trust me, there's plenty of lore here, we just don't have to go minute by minute of the game. In this game, we the player are making our very own Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and the game can kind of be split into thirds. The first is the night shift, where we're building the pizzeria, testing out arcade machines, and buying things. The second third is then the day shift, where during the day in operations, we go back and we buy things and repair things to make the restaurant function in this very cramped metal office with no doors and a blaring air conditioning system. And then we get to the salvage minigames, where the player can decide if they want to salvage or scrap the animatronics that are found waiting outside of the pizzeria we're building. These 4 animatronics are all important in their own right, and they will all get their own pins. So let's just go through the characters of this game one at a time. First, Molten Freddy. He seems to be an amalgamation of wires, endoskeleton, and computer bits, with a melted Funtime Freddy mask on top. It speaks in this manic, glitched out voice that sounds like multiple people speaking at once. It also has 2 lines worth noting: one big happy family, and together again. So pin that Molten Freddy sounds like multiple people, and they seem to have some sort of familial connection to either the other animatronics here or the player. Next, Scrap Trap. Immediately, he looks like a worse for wear and beat up Springtrap, also a worse designed Springtrap. And his voice sounds like a gravelly version of that Mr. Afton we hear in the Sister Location cutscene. He also mentions familiarity. In one of his voice lines, "You may not recognize me at first, but I assure you, it's still me. And I always come back." And most notably, and incredibly important, look at the credits. We have Molten Freddy, Scrap Baby, who we'll get into, Tutorial Unit, who we've seen, Cassette Man, who we'll get into, and lo and behold, William Afton. So 1, that has to be Scrap Trap, linking him to Mr. Afton, and 2, we now know Mr. Afton's first name, William. The same William Afton of Afton Robotics. And before I go off on the tangent of connecting things that I so desperately want to, we will just pin that Scrap Trap is Springtrap, who is William Afton, who is the creator of the Fun Times and the father of that one girl. Now, on to Scrap Baby. By name and design, she seems to be a worse-for-wear version of Circus Baby, which is a bit confusing because of Ennard's existence, but whatever. Judging by her voice lines, she also seems to think that this whole operation was actually William's doing and she's trying to help him. She's wrong, but it's worth noting, so put a pin there. Also add on the pin that her name is or was Elizabeth, according to Cassette Man, who we'll get to. Finally, the last one and most strange one, Lefty. At first, we don't get much of a read on him. Frankly, he seems brand new compared to all this trashed garbage. And he only shushes us. But looking at the blueprints of the game and this image in the back alley, we start to get a picture that Lefty was built to contain the puppet. So put a pin that Lefty is an animatronic built by the Cassette Man to capture the puppet, especially according to its name, Lure, Encapsulate, Fuse, Transport, Extract. Speaking of him, we've danced around him enough, the man of the hour, Cassette Man. He's the voice guiding us through every salvage minigame, and he gives us 2 lore dumps in the form of monologues at the end of 2 different endings. The tape is labeled HRY223. Now, this could imply that his name is Harry or Henry, and we do get confirmation from the books and from an interview, but that's not in the games, and we're trying to only use game information here, so Put that aside. Don't use it. For now, all we know is his name is Cassette Man, okay? He gives us a lot of lore, but I'm just going to try to bullet point it into pins as I sift through his monologues. The location of FNAF 6 is a metal maze made to look like a fake pizzeria filled with scents and smells to attract animatronics that are haunted. He intended for the job taker, the player, to exit before he burns everything to the ground, but he notes that he assumes that the person who actually showed up for the job doesn't want to leave, and is in fact right where he wants to be and burns along with him and all of the animatronics. Pin. His final plan is to collect every animatronic that's still out there and burn them to the ground, himself and anyone else involved in this whole fiasco so they can all move on. Pin. Cassette Man confirms that his daughter was the one who was killed outside of a pizzeria by this purple guy. Pin. He also confirms that she then goes on to possess the puppet, who then shepherds the souls of the other victims of Purple Guy into the animatronics. Pin. He also confirms the one he hates the most out of these four and his old friend is none other than William Afton, judging by the visuals that go on during that time. Pin. In a second monologue received from the Insanity ending, Cassette Man then goes on to confirm a few things that we already had suspicions about. William Afton is the one who disassembled the animatronics in the Follow Me minigames. Pin. He also mentions that he did this again, which implies that he was the one who originally did the murders. This purple guy as well. Pin. Finally, he mentions a wound first inflicted on me, which implies two things. One, the final other purple guy is also William Afton. Pin. But also, this murder of Cassette Man's daughter seems to be the first of William's murders. Pin there. Before we move on, there's also some blueprints that give us a lot of lore as well. First off, there's a blueprint of the scooper, which tells us the actual function of this machine. It's a remnant injector. Pin. It also notes that if overheated, the effects of Remnant may wear off entirely. What is Remnant? We'll have to speculate in the third video. We then get the blueprints that tell us about Lefty that we already referenced. We get the blueprints of some machine that seems to be the thing that plays the audio in the vents of FNAF 6 and starts the fire. And finally, very important, we get a blueprint of what looks like Molten Freddy's face that has the security tags Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, and Ballora. It also mentions that this creature has the most remnant of any of the animatronics here. So, Pin that this seems to be the leftover of Ennard after Scrap Baby broke off of it. Also, Remnant seems to be something about souls, but we'll get more into that in the third video. Alright, on to the minigames. Pretty much everything in this game that you can buy has a minigame, but there's a few secret ones that seem more important than the others. Candy Cadet, Fruity Maze, Midnight Motorist, and Security Puppet. If you talk to Candy Cadet enough, he'll eventually tell you a very morbid story, one of 3, but all of them have to do with taking 5 things, melting them into one thing, and having that one thing not work the way as intended. So, put a pin there. That seems to be a recurring theme. Fruity Maze, if beaten several times, eventually shows the player girl start crying as she collects dead dogs. Then we see, presumably William in the spring Bonnie suit, luring her in the back saying that he knows where her dog is and that the dog is okay. This just seems to be one of the ways that William Afton tricked kids into the safe room. Security Puppet kind of shows Take Cake to the Children in another light. It shows the Cassette Man's daughter being locked outside and eventually the puppet going after her. But by the time the puppet gets there, she's long dead and the rain shuts him down too. We can assume that this is where the possession took place, so put a pin right there. And for the most confusing one of all, Midnight Motorist. To summarize, this yellow guy comes home, the person on the couch watching TV says, leave him alone, he's had a hard day, but yellow guy doesn't listen. He bangs on the door, demands to be let in, and then decides to go around back and try to sneak in through the window. When he gets there, he notices that the window is broken and his kid snuck out. Oh, and he went to that place. This is weird, pin there. A few other notable things are in this cutscene though. 1, pin that there's animatronic footprints, put a pin that there is an unmarked grave in the woods, and put a pin that there's a building called Junior's that yellow guy is not allowed in. As far as Scott Games teasers go, there aren't many pictures that tell us a lot of things, but the source code of the Scott Games website and the FNAF World website actually had a conversation for a while. If broken down, the conversation reads, "You're overcrowding us, be quiet, you can't tell us what to do anymore, yes I can, you will do everything that I tell you to, we outnumber you, that doesn't matter dummy, we found a way to eject you. You would be lost without me. Haha, say goodbye to our friend. I can put myself back together." So pin that this conversation happens. I'm pretty sure we know who this is, but I'm not going to speculate until video 3. Editing Riley here, this is like the day the video goes up. I totally forgot about the graves. The graves, you get that you get in one of the endings, you get these 6 graves with 4 visible names, 1 blocked and then 1 far in the distance. People will speculate what these mean, but we'll get into that in the 3rd video. It's just super important to mention these. I totally forgot. Brain fart. That was a long one, and there's a lot in there. And I'm sure I missed something, but we'll get more into that later. For now, let's move on to the final game I'll be considering for the timeline, Ultimate Custom Night. And I think this one should be faster. For anyone who doesn't know, Ultimate Custom Night is Chaos Incarnate. Essentially, it's an homage to the entire franchise with 50 different characters that could be set from AI level 0 to 20. And you just play. There's no real plot to it, but there is lore. You can unlock some cutscenes that have lore in them, but I want to start with the strangest bit of lore first, go into the death quotes, and then we'll talk about the cutscene. In my opinion, the strangest piece of lore is the Old Man Consequences secret. If you only set Old Man Consequences as your enemy, go in game and catch a fish, you're taken to the FNAF World lake. Old Man Consequences tells you to come sit with me a while, leave the demon to his demons, rest your own soul, there is nothing else. This is weird. Put a pin in there for sure. Also, for the record, if you break into the lake this time, it just crashes the game. Also, the background audio, if slowed down and pitched up, reveals someone screaming what sounds like Mike, so put a pin there as well. Now onto the death quotes. There are a lot of them, and not all of them are important. Frankly, some of the ones I've picked out might not be important, but I went and picked out every death quote that could have lore in it, and we'll just pin each one.
I am remade, but not by you, by the one you should not have killed. I am given flesh to be your tormentor.
This time, there is more than an illusion to fear. We know who our friends are, and you are not one of them.
I am your wickedness, made of flesh. The shadow fears me.
Shh. I've been looking for you, and now I will never let you go.
What is this new prison? Is it me trapped, or is it you? Perhaps it's us both.
I was the first. I have seen everything. I have seen him, the one you shouldn't have killed.
Greetings from the fire, and from the one you should not have killed.
He's here and always watching, the one you shouldn't have killed.
The others are like animals, but I am very aware.
Also note, the voice here sounds like it could be that cassette man's daughter, just pointing it out there.
I am the fearful reflection of what you have created.
Admit it, you wanted to let me in. These are strange circumstances that have brought us together.
A song was requested of me, and now I sing it.
There's a lot here, pins for all of those of course. Again, I'm not going to go into what those mean yet, that's for video 3, but it is worth noting that this, the one you should not have killed, seems important. But there's a few that I wanted to separate from the others because they feel very specific and intentional. The mediocre melodies are a weird cast of characters, but a few of them have one specific voice line that is more menacing than their regular ones that has another voice behind it. Those would be,
We've only just begun. I will never let you leave. I will never let you rest.
This is how it feels, and you get to experience it over and over and over again, forever. I will never let you leave.
He tried to release you. He tried to release us. But I'm not gonna let that happen. I will hold you here. I will keep you here, no matter how many times they burn us.
that's honestly the majority of the lore of this game. But we do have some cutscenes to go over that you unlock from doing specific amounts of points beaten while playing the game. The first is a series of an anime-style rivalry of Freddy and Foxy. It's weird, but it could be important, so throw a pin in there. The second one is a series of cutscenes of Toy Chica, who seems to be kidnapping other animatronics, stealing something from them, and saying, "He'll be mine by the end of the day." This could mirror William Afton, it's hard to tell. Put a pin there. There are two more important bits of lore in Ultimate Custom Night that didn't really fit anywhere else. One, rarely in the vent right above your desk you can see this face. That's weird, put a pin there. And finally, if you somehow get as many points as possible in this game, you're rewarded with this cutscene of a glitching, twitching golden Freddy, slowly fading off into the distance. Put a pin there. Whew, that was a lot. But I think we're done with gathering lore, at least all the lore that I could find. Let's piece together all the lore we have now and try to make this timeline. which will be in next week's video. But I have a job for you, so don't leave yet. Already on last week's video, some kind folks in the comments were pointing out some pieces of lore that I missed. So if you find anything in these videos that I forgot to mention from the games or Scott website that seems important, let me know. And please in the comments, specify if you're okay with me shouting you out. Essentially, the beginning of the next week's video, I want to just do a speed round of everything that I missed so we have all the lore possible. I'll just probably be shouting out the first person I find who says something that I missed. So this thing was said by this person, this thing was said by this person, so on and so forth. But again, that'll have to wait till next week, because look at the length of this video already. By God, I am one person. I cannot make any longer of a video in 1 week. But that's all for now. So if you haven't, go watch last week's video on the lore, or if you're from the future, continue on the playlist and continue to part 3. But for now, let's thank the wonderful patrons of this channel, the Toasted Slices. Thank you Emberisk, Zenith, Raven Eris, Charlie Bean, Lovey Puppy, Stormachow, Just BKZ, Chickpea, Isle, Lola Fembo, The Viper 26, James, and Loose Harriet. And until next time, as always, stay toasty, Slices.